I refused to babysit. My sister put the kids in an Uber to my apartment anyway, except it was South, not North Clark. By the time I got the call, they were freezing and hypothermic. The fluorescent lights in the South Side Chicago police precinct buzz overhead like angry wasps. It's 2 a.m, and I can taste copper in my mouth from biting the inside of my cheek during the drive here. When Sergeant Miller called, his voice was careful, measured. "Miss Baker, we have your niece and nephew here. They're safe, but we need you to come down." I'd thrown on whatever clothes I could find and driven through the blizzard, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. Cooper and Piper are here. They're safe. That's all that matters. But Miller doesn't lead me to the children. His hand on my elbow is firm, almost forceful, as he guides me past the waiting area, where I catch a glimpse of silver emergency blankets. He steers me into an interrogation room instead. The door closes with a click that sounds too final. Miller drops a plastic evidence bag on the metal table between us. Inside is a crumpled note, and even through the clouded plastic, I can see my name scrawled across it in Sloan's handwriting. "Miss Baker." Miller's voice has lost all warmth. "Can you explain why a wealthy, Lincoln Park architect would send 2 small children to a frozen industrial wasteland in the middle of a blizzard?" The words hit me like a fist to the stomach. What? I didn't. Child abandonment is a felony in Illinois. He continues, leaning forward. I can smell the coffee on his breath. Child trafficking carries even heavier penalties. You want to start explaining. My hands shake. This isn't real. This can't be happening. There's been a mistake, I say, but my voice comes out strangled. I live at 20,400 North Clark, Lincoln Park. The children, where were they found? Miller's eyes don't leave my face. 2400 South Clark Street, an abandoned industrial park, during a blizzard warning, dressed in summer clothes. The difference hits me like ice water. North vs South, 1 letter. 2 completely different worlds. My address is tree-lined streets and boutique coffee shops. South Clark at that number is warehouses and broken streetlights. And nowhere a child should ever be, especially not at night, especially not in January. I have to stop, breathe. I told my sister no. I sent her an email. I have proof. Miller crosses his arms. People send emails to cover their tracks all the time, Miss Baker. You'd be surprised how often we see that. 12 hours ago, I was at my drafting table, racing against a deadline that could make or break my career. The city park bid. 3 years of work, compressed into one final presentation, due Monday morning. When Sloan called, I was eyebrow deep in elevation drawings. "Ren, thank God you answered." Her voice had that manic edge I've learned to recognize. "I need you to watch Cooper and Piper tonight. Preston surprised me with a trip to Aspen, and we're leaving in 2 hours." "I can't. I told you last week I have that deadline." "This is important, Ren. Family is important." The familiar guilt tried to claw its way up my throat, but I swallowed it down. "I will not be home tonight. Do not bring them to my apartment. I will not answer the door." I'd hung up and immediately sent an email at 3:30 p.m., just to be clear. Just to have it in writing. Just to make sure there was no confusion. I will not be home. Do not bring them. I will not open the door. Now Miller is watching me like I'm a liar. Like I'm the kind of person who would endanger children. The email could have been sent after the fact, he says. Or, you could have changed your mind and panicked when they didn't show up. Can I see them? My voice cracks. Please. I need to see that they're okay. Something shifts in Miller's expression. Maybe it's the desperation in my voice. Or maybe he's just giving me enough rope to hang myself. He stands up. Follow me. I push back my chair and follow him down the hall to a darkened observation room. Through the one-way glass, I see them. Cooper is wrapped in one of those silver emergency blankets, the kind marathoners wear. He's shaking so hard I can see it from here, his whole body convulsing with cold or shock, or both. Piper sits next to him, clutching her stuffed bear, and her eyes are vacant. Empty. Like she's somewhere else entirely, somewhere her mind had to go to survive what happened tonight. My knees buckle. I catch myself on the glass. That fog descends. The one that's been my companion for 28 years. The voice that whispers, "Fix this. Protect Sloan. Take the blame. You're the responsible one. That's your job." I could do it. I could tell Miller it was all a misunderstanding, that I'd meant to say yes, that the address confusion was an honest mistake. I could make this go away for everyone. Everyone except Cooper and Piper. The Uber driver, Miller says behind me, was told their father was waiting for them. She dropped them at the curb and drove away. I close my eyes. You should thank God for Mr. Henderson, the night security guard at the industrial park. If he hadn't heard them banging on his booth, screaming for help. Miller pauses. Lets the silence fill in what he's not saying. You'd be identifying bodies at the morgue right now, Miss Baker. 2 frozen children. The blood drains from my face so fast, I have to grip the windowsill. This wasn't a mistake. This was calculated. Sloan knew I said no. She read that email I checked, and the read receipt showed 3:47 p.m. She'd opened it, absorbed every word. And then she'd done this anyway. Punishment for daring to set a boundary. Punishment for choosing my career over her convenience. She'd sent them to die. I turned to face Miller. My hands are still shaking, but my voice is steady. I didn't call that Uber. I have the email I sent refusing to babysit. I have proof I told her no. I meet his eyes and don't look away. I'm not covering for her this time. The words feel like stepping off a cliff. 28 years of conditioning. Of being the good daughter. The reliable sister. The family fixer. All of it crumbles away. Miller studies my face for a long moment. Then he motions back toward the hallway. Let's go back to the table, Miss Baker. We'll start from the beginning. I sat back down at the metal table, my mind swirling. Miller's expression was unreadable, but I could feel his eyes on me. Dissecting every movement, every twitch of my hand. I fumbled with the sleeve of my coat, the rough fabric biting at my fingertips, trying to ground myself. The room was too sterile, too cold. The buzzing of the fluorescent lights above was deafening in the silence that stretched between us. It made my teeth ache. Miller slid the plastic evidence bag back across the table toward me, the crumpled note inside glaring up at me. The words written in Sloan's messy handwriting seemed to burn into my skull. It didn't make sense. I hadn't agreed to this. I hadn't opened the door when they'd come knocking. I had set a boundary. I had said no. I need to understand why you'd put them in harm's way like that. Miller's voice broke through the fog in my mind. You're telling me it was a mistake? A misunderstanding? No, I said, my voice tight and raw. It wasn't like that. I never agreed to babysit. The words sounded hollow, like I was repeating them too many times, and they'd lost their meaning. I rubbed my hands together, trying to chase away the tremors. He didn't look convinced. Then why were they found alone in the South Side? During a blizzard. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. You sure you didn't change your mind? That's a pretty big difference in the addresses, Bella. The name hit me like a slap. Bella. He didn't know me. Not really. Not like Sloan did. I swallowed hard. I don't know what happened, but I have proof. I sent an email. I told her no. I didn't want to do this. Miller raised an eyebrow. Emails don't always clear things up. Sometimes they're just paper trails. He folded his arms across his chest. We see that all the time. I felt a knot of anger tighten in my stomach. I wasn't a liar. I wasn't like the others, the ones who hid behind smoke and mirrors. I didn't do this. I said again, this time with more force. The words felt solid, like I could stake my entire life on them. Then let's see this email you've been talking about, Miller said, leaning forward now, his tone shifting, almost intrigued. Let's see if it tells the story you're telling. I pulled my phone from my pocket, the weight of it heavy in my hand. It felt wrong, like I was holding something that didn't belong to me. But I opened the email, the timestamp glaring at me like a damning reminder. It was all there, clear as day. I slid the phone across the table, my eyes trained on Miller's face, as he read the email, his fingers tapping against the screen. I will not be home. Do not bring them. I will not open the door. The words seemed to echo in my head. That was me. That was my voice, frozen in time. Miller didn't say anything for a moment. His gaze flickered between the phone screen and my face, trying to find something hidden. I wasn't hiding anything. I hadn't lied. This wasn't on me. He sighed, pushing the phone back toward me. Okay, he said, and for the first time, there was something almost sympathetic in his eyes. You didn't send them to the South Side, but your sister did, didn't she? She did this. The anger flared up in me again, hot and bitter. I nodded slowly. Yes, she did this. Miller's expression turned harder. And you're telling me that you didn't know? That you didn't even have a clue she would do this? I felt my pulse quicken, my heart thudding against my ribs. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I had to keep it together for Cooper and Piper, for me. I didn't know she would take it this far. I thought she'd listen, that she'd respect my decision. But she doesn't. She never has. You've been cleaning up after her for years, haven't you? Miller asked, his voice soft, but cutting. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of his words settle in. I hadn't realized it before, but it was true. Every time there was a mess, every time Sloan needed saving, I was the one who stepped in. I was the fixer. The responsible one. I opened my eyes and met Miller's gaze. Yes. But not this time. The door to the room opened with a creak, and I looked up, startled. Another officer stepped inside, a man in his early 30s with a quiet expression. Miller looked over at him, then back at me. Come on, Miller said, standing up. We're going to show you something. I pushed myself to my feet, my legs shaky, and followed him out of the room. We walked down the hallway in silence. The harsh lighting overhead, casting long shadows on the walls. I could hear my heart thumping in my ears, the sound of my own breath too loud in the stillness. Miller led me into a small observation room at the end of the hall. The lights were dim here, and the glass was reflective, giving me the illusion of looking in from the outside. Through the one-way mirror, I could see them. Cooper and Piper. They were sitting together on a bench, wrapped in silver emergency blankets. Cooper was shaking so badly, I could see his whole body convulsing. Piper was sitting beside him, clutching her stuffed bear, but her eyes were vacant. My stomach lurched. I couldn't look at them without feeling like I was suffocating. I turned to Miller, my voice small, barely a whisper. "Are they okay?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he watched me for a moment, his face unreadable. Finally, he nodded. "They're okay. But barely." I pressed my hand to the glass, my breath fogging up the surface. I couldn't look away from them. I could see Cooper's teeth chattering through his trembling lips. I could see the way Piper's little shoulders sagged. Like she had given up trying to understand what had happened to her world. I felt something inside me crack open. A deep, aching hurt that I hadn't allowed myself to feel until now. I had promised them safety. I had promised them I would protect them. And I had failed. The tears came without warning, hot and sharp, stinging my eyes. I turned away from the mirror, pressing my palm to my face to catch the tears. I wasn't supposed to cry. I was supposed to be the strong one. The one who could fix everything. But right now, I felt like nothing. Like I was just another person who had failed them. I closed my eyes and took a slow, steadying breath. I can't fix this, can I? Miller's voice was quiet when he spoke. You can't fix everything, Miss Baker. But you can make sure it doesn't happen again. I looked up at him, wiping my tears away. I'm done fixing her, I said, my voice strong. I'm done. For the first time in what felt like years, I felt the weight of my own words. The words that would change everything. I sat back in my chair, trying to steady my breath. The room felt smaller, the walls pressing in with every passing second. Miller was quiet for a moment, letting the weight of my words sink in. For the first time since this whole mess began, I felt a flicker of something like relief. Done fixing her, I had said. It wasn't just a statement, it was a vow. Sloan had taken so much from me over the years, twisted my loyalty until it felt like duty instead of choice. But no more. I wasn't going to cover for her anymore. Not now, not ever. Miller gave me a long look, as if weighing my resolve. Finally, he nodded. You might have done the right thing, but it's gonna be a long road. A messy one. I glanced back through the observation window. Cooper was now huddled close to Piper, his small body shaking against hers, as if he could find warmth in her touch. I wanted to run to them, to scoop them up and make it all go away. But I couldn't. Not yet. I turned back to Miller, my throat tight. How do I make it right? How do I fix this? You don't, Miller said. But you can make sure it never happens again. And you start by telling the truth. No matter what. The truth will take you further than any lie. I nodded, my hands clenched into fists. I need to see them, I said, my voice breaking despite my efforts to sound composed. I need to make sure they're okay. Miller didn't say anything. But I saw a slight shift in his posture, reluctant approval. He stood up and motioned for me to follow. As I walked behind him down the sterile hallway, the sound of our footsteps echoed in the silence, each one too loud, too deliberate. When we reached the observation room, the door opened with a soft creak, and I stepped inside. The children were still sitting on the bench, now covered in thick blankets that barely seemed to warm them. I could see the pallor of their skin in the dim light. They looked so small, so fragile. Piper's eyes met mine through the glass, and her vacant stare cut straight to my heart. She didn't smile, didn't make a sound. It was as if she had retreated inside herself, the trauma too great for her to process. I felt the sting of tears again, but I forced them back. Not now. Not in front of them. Cooper, on the other hand, was trembling so violently that I could see it even from across the room. His small frame shook with each breath, his teeth chattering uncontrollably. But when he looked up, his eyes were clear, filled with a quiet desperation that shattered something inside me. I couldn't stand it anymore. I couldn't just watch from the other side of the glass. I had to be there for them, had to make sure they were okay. I stepped toward the door, my hand already reaching for the handle when Miller's voice stopped me. "You can't go in just yet," he said, his tone gentle but firm. "They need time. They've been through a lot." I nodded, my heart heavy in my chest. "I know. I'll take you to them soon," Miller added. "But right now, you need to focus. Get your statement in order. The rest will come after." I didn't argue. I knew he was right. As much as I wanted to rush in and pull them close, I couldn't. Not until the right time. Instead, I turned back toward Miller, trying to focus on the task at hand. "What happens now?" "We start with the paperwork," he said. "Then you'll need to make a statement, and we'll take it from there. It's gonna be a process. A long one." I took a deep breath and nodded again. It felt like too much to process, too much to take in all at once, but I had to, for them. We walked back to the interrogation room in silence. Miller sat across from me again, his expression now less clinical, almost sympathetic. I appreciated that. In a world full of people who only seemed to care about their own interests, his quiet understanding was a rare comfort. "Here's what we know," Miller started, pulling out a folder from his bag. He flipped it open, showing me a series of notes and reports. "Your sister sent the children to an industrial park, the kind of place no kid should be in, especially not in the middle of a blizzard. It's lucky that security guard heard them. He's the only reason they're alive right now." I nodded, the guilt bubbling up again, sharp and biting. I had refused to watch them, and yet somehow, I felt responsible. I had let them down in ways I couldn't even put into words. Miller continued. "We'll be tracking down your sister. She'll be facing charges for child endangerment, maybe more. And we'll be looking into what else she's been hiding." I felt the weight of those words settle in my chest. This wasn't just about the kids anymore. This was about everything. Sloan had always been the golden child, the one everyone thought had it together, but now it was all coming apart. "Where is she now?" I asked, my voice low. "We don't know yet. But we'll find her," Miller said. "And when we do, she'll be held accountable." A heavy silence hung between us. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't ready to confront my sister, the woman I had spent years covering for, protecting. But I knew one thing for sure, I wasn't going to back down this time. Not for her. Not for anyone. I'm ready, I said quietly, looking Miller in the eye. I'll do whatever it takes. Miller nodded, and I could see the flicker of approval in his gaze. Good. Because this won't be easy. But you're doing the right thing. I took a shaky breath, steadying myself. This was it. There was no turning back now. The road ahead was going to be hard, but I would face it. For Cooper, for Piper, for me, and most importantly, I would face it alone. The next few hours passed in a blur. After Miller's last words, I found myself in a small, quiet room, waiting. There was nothing to do but stare at the walls. The sterile, white walls that felt like they were closing in on me. I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd just learned. Sloan had done this. She'd sent them into the cold, knowing full well what would happen. She'd betrayed me, and she'd put her children in danger just to prove a point. I had been the one to set a boundary, the one who had told her no. But she never cared about boundaries. She never had. I tried to push the thought out of my mind, but it kept coming back, each time more powerful. My sister had always been the one who needed saving. She'd made sure to put me in the position where I had to be the responsible one. And I had done it, again and again. But this time, I couldn't fix it. I couldn't make it better. She had gone too far. A soft knock on the door pulled me out of my thoughts. Miller stepped in, his face unreadable. "It's time," he said. His voice clipped, but not unkind. I nodded, standing up slowly. My legs felt like they were made of lead, but I couldn't let that stop me. I had to see them, had to make sure they were really okay. I had to know that they were safe. Miller led me down the hall to another room. One I hadn't noticed before. This room was darker, with only a few lights overhead. It felt like the kind of place where time didn't move, where nothing changed. But when I stepped through the door, I saw them. Cooper and Piper. Cooper was sitting on the floor, his knees drawn up to his chest. He looked small, so small, wrapped in a blanket that didn't seem to help much. His face was pale, and his eyes were wide. The kind of wide that only came from fear. I felt a lump form in my throat as I watched him, wishing I could rush over and pull him into my arms. Piper was sitting next to him, her head resting on his shoulder. She wasn't crying, but the emptiness in her eyes was worse. She had shut herself off from everything around her, as if she couldn't handle what had happened. They were both so still, like they had forgotten how to move, how to be children. I knew the cold had done this to them. But I also knew that something else had hurt them too. Something deeper. Something that went beyond just the freezing temperatures and the fear of being alone. I stepped forward, slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. Piper's eyes flickered up at me, and for a moment, I saw a spark of recognition. She didn't smile, didn't move, but there was something in her gaze that told me she knew I was here. She knew I had come for them. "Cooper," I said softly, kneeling down next to him. I reached out, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. His eyes met mine, and the silence between us felt heavy. "You're okay now," I whispered. "You're safe. I'm here." Cooper nodded, but I could see the way his hands trembled. His fingers curling around the edge of the blanket, as if he needed something to hold on to. I thought we were going to die," he said, his voice flat, as if the words had lost their meaning. I could hear the rawness in his voice, the weight of everything he had been through in those words. He wasn't crying, but it didn't matter. His fear, his pain, were more real in that moment than any tear could express. "You were so brave," I whispered, wrapping my arms around him gently. "You kept your sister safe. You found help. You were so brave." Cooper's shoulders shook, but not from the cold. He clung to me for a moment, his small body trembling in my arms. I felt the weight of his fear in the way he held me. "I don't want to be brave anymore," he said, his voice cracking. "I just want to be a kid." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. Cooper was 9, and he had already learned that being a kid wasn't safe. It was a lesson no child should ever have to learn. "I know, sweetie," I said, pulling him closer. "You don't have to be brave anymore. I'm here now. You're safe." Piper shifted beside us, her little hand reaching for mine. I took it without thinking, feeling the warmth of her small fingers against my skin. "Are we going to be okay?" she asked in a small, almost inaudible voice. I looked down at her, her wide eyes staring up at me, waiting for an answer. And in that moment, I realized something. I had spent so much time trying to protect my sister, trying to be the one to fix everything. But the truth was, it wasn't about fixing anymore. It was about protecting them, Cooper and Piper. "We're going to be okay," I said, my voice steady now. "We're going to make sure you're safe. No one is going to hurt you again. I promise." I could see the faintest glimmer of trust in Piper's eyes. She didn't smile, but it was enough. I could see the relief in her face, the weight of the fear beginning to lift. Miller stepped forward, his presence suddenly too large in the small room. He gave me a nod, a silent acknowledgement of what was happening. The children were safe. That was the most important thing, but there was still so much left to do. I stood up slowly, holding both children's hands, as I guided them toward the door. Miller followed us, his footsteps echoing in the silence. When we stepped into the hallway, I realized that for the first time in a long time, I was no longer carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. I had found my focus. And it wasn't about Sloan. It wasn't about my parents or my responsibilities as the family fixer. It was about them. Cooper, Piper. For the first time in my life, I wasn't going to be the one to fix everything. I was going to protect them, no matter the cost. And that was enough. We walked in silence, each of us lost in our own thoughts. But for the first time, I knew I was on the right path. The path to healing, to justice. And this time, I wasn't going to back down. The next few days were a blur of paperwork, legal meetings, and phone calls I barely registered. After the night at the precinct, I tried to focus, to put my energy into what was next. But each time I closed my eyes, I saw them. Cooper's trembling hands, Piper's empty stare. They were safe now, but the image of their faces haunted me, gnawing at my insides. I hadn't been able to protect them. And that guilt stayed with me, thick and suffocating. Declan had stayed close, offering a quiet presence in the days that followed. He didn't press me to talk about the kids or the chaos, but I knew he was watching me, waiting for me to crack. I wanted to tell him everything, how scared I was, how lost, but the words always stuck in my throat. It wasn't just about Sloan anymore. It was about the family I had built, the one that had been shattered by betrayal. It was about healing, which felt like a far-off dream I could never quite reach. In the midst of it all, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but I recognized the area code. I knew it had to be related to the case. I let it ring for a moment, unsure if I was ready to face whatever news it might bring. Then, I picked up. "Bella?" The voice on the other end was deep, calm, but there was an edge to it, a sense of urgency. It was Elena Russo, the attorney I had hired to help with the custody case. I straightened up in my chair. "Yes, Elena. We need to meet. There's something important I need to go over with you." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. I couldn't place it, but something about her tone didn't sit right with me. "Is everything okay?" "As well as it can be, considering the circumstances," she replied. "But I need to meet with you in person. Today." I agreed to the meeting, my heart heavy in my chest. I wasn't sure if I was ready for whatever it was, but I couldn't avoid it. I had to face this, just like everything else. So, I told Declan I had to go out for a while, grabbed my coat, and headed out into the brisk Chicago air. Elena's office was located in one of those imposing, glass-fronted buildings downtown. The kind of place that made you feel small, insignificant, like you were just one tiny part in a much bigger machine. It was a stark contrast to the small, chaotic space I called home. But it felt right, professional, clean. I needed that right now, something solid to hold on to. I walked into the lobby, my footsteps echoing in the large, empty space. The receptionist was quick to point me to the elevator, and soon I found myself in the small, sterile conference room, where Elena was waiting. She sat behind a large wooden desk, her sharp eyes scanning over some papers in front of her. When I walked in, she looked up, a tight smile crossing her lips. "Bella," she said, standing to greet me. "Thank you for coming." "Of course," I said, sitting down across from her. "What's going on? What's so urgent?" Elena placed the papers down and folded her hands on the desk. "I've been reviewing the case, and I want to be honest with you." She paused, as though weighing her words carefully. "There's a lot more to this than just the kids. Sloan isn't the only one we need to worry about." I frowned, my heart suddenly pounding in my chest. "What do you mean? Is she planning something?" "It's not just Sloan," Elena said. "It's your parents too. Preston and Lenore. They've been working behind the scenes to control the narrative, and they've been trying to bury the truth." My stomach dropped. "What are you talking about? I don't understand." "Sloan is lying in her statements, of course. But your parents, they're trying to make this go away quietly. They're willing to pay off the right people, pull the right strings to cover this up." Elena leaned forward, her gaze steady. "They're offering you money. A lot of money. A bribe, basically, to say it was all a misunderstanding." I couldn't breathe. The air in the room felt too thick. "What? No, that's not. They want you to say you gave the wrong address by accident." Elena interrupted. "That it was just confusion. They'll pay you to lie about it. They want this to disappear, Bella. And they're willing to do anything to protect their reputation, even if it means throwing you under the bus." I sat back in my chair, the shock crashing over me in waves. I felt sick. The idea that my parents, my own flesh and blood, would offer me money to lie, to cover up their daughter's cruelty. It didn't make sense. This is unbelievable, I whispered, my mind racing. I knew they were messed up, but this… I know it's hard to believe, Elena said softly, but it's the truth. And we can't afford to ignore it. Not if we want to win this case. I shook my head, disbelief clawing at my chest. I wanted to scream, to throw something. But I couldn't. My mind kept going back to the night Cooper and Piper had been abandoned. The cold, the fear, the terror in their eyes. I had to protect them. I couldn't let Sloan, or my parents, get away with this. What do we do now? I asked, my voice quiet but firm. Elena slid a folder across the table toward me. We fight. We fight for the truth, for the kids, for you. I took the folder, my fingers trembling. I'm done with them, I said, my voice hardening with resolve. I'm done with all of them. Elena nodded. Good. But it's going to be a long road. Are you ready for that? I looked at the papers in front of me, the weight of what was to come settling over me. I don't have a choice. And for the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of something inside me. Something that wasn't fear, something that wasn't guilt. It was determination. I wasn't going to back down. Not anymore. I stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor, and I looked Elena in the eye. Let's do this. For Cooper and Piper. Let's make sure this doesn't go unnoticed. Elena gave a sharp nod, her lips curling into a small, approving smile. We'll do it together. I left her office that day, knowing that the road ahead would be tough. But I wasn't alone. And for the first time in a long time, I had hope. The courtroom was quiet. Too quiet. As if it were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The walls, lined with dark wood paneling, seemed to loom over everyone, casting shadows across the room. I took a seat. My hands shaking slightly as I gripped the armrests, trying to steady myself. It wasn't just the cold air that made my skin feel tight. It was the weight of what was to come. Across the room, Sloan was sitting at the plaintiff's table, her posture perfect, her face the picture of controlled distress. She had perfected this act over the years. The trembling lip, the glassy-eyed look that made her seem vulnerable. Like someone who needed protection. It wasn't real. I knew it wasn't real. But I also knew that in here, in this place, it didn't matter what was real. What mattered was the story she was telling. And she was good at it. The judge, a woman with sharp eyes, and an air of authority that seemed to fill the entire room, was seated at the bench, waiting for the proceedings to begin. Her eyes flicked over the papers in front of her. Before she glanced up, her gaze meeting mine for a brief moment. There was no sympathy there, only professional detachment. She didn't care about me. She didn't care about the story I had lived for the past 28 years. She cared about facts, evidence, the law. Miss Montgomery. The judge's voice rang out, commanding attention. You may call your first witness. Sloan's attorney. A man in an expensive suit, who looked like he had never seen a hard day's work in his life, stood up with a smooth motion. He had the look of someone who was used to getting his way. He was confident, polished, and completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit him. Sloan Baker Montgomery, Your Honor, he said, gesturing to Sloan, who stood gracefully and made her way to the witness stand, a tear carefully placed on her cheek, as if on cue. She took the oath, her voice steady as she swore to tell the truth. Though I knew that was a lie from the moment she said it. Sloan's attorney turned to her with a practiced smile. "Mrs. Montgomery, can you please tell the court what happened on the night of January 14th? Sloan's voice, when she spoke, was full of the kind of hurt that only someone who knew how to play the part could fake. "I was supposed to leave for a business trip with my father," she said, her voice breaking slightly, though the tears were still not forthcoming. "I'd arranged for my sister, Wren, to watch Cooper and Piper. She agreed to babysit." She paused, looking down at the table in front of her, as though the weight of the memory was too much to bear. "She said yes on the phone. I never would have sent them otherwise." I could feel my jaw tightening, my hands squeezing the armrests, as I fought to stay calm. I wanted to stand up, to scream at her, to tell everyone in that room the truth. But I didn't. I couldn't. Not yet. The truth was too precious to waste. The truth was what I needed to win this battle. The attorney asked more questions, but I couldn't focus on the words anymore. The whole room seemed to fade away, leaving only the image of Sloan standing there, twisting the truth like a piece of clay in her hands. It was infuriating, and for a moment, I let myself feel the heat of the anger rise in my chest. But I knew better than to let it consume me. The lawyer wrapped up his questioning and took a seat, and the judge turned to Elena, who was sitting beside me, her expression unreadable. Elena stood slowly, her heels clicking against the floor, in a way that seemed to echo through the silence. She didn't waste any time. "Your Honor," Elena said, her voice smooth and calm, "I would like to cross-examine the witness." The judge gave a slight nod, and Elena stepped forward, her gaze locked on Sloan, who sat straighter in her chair, as though bracing herself for whatever was coming. "Elena Russo, for the record," she said, addressing the court, and then turned her focus back to Sloan. "Miss Montgomery, you testified that your sister, Wren, agreed to babysit the children. Is that correct?" Sloan nodded, her face the picture of sorrow, though I could see the tension in her jaw, the way her hands gripped the edge of the witness stand. She knew what was coming. "You're certain," Elena continued, her voice low but sharp, "that your sister agreed? That she told you she would be home to take care of Cooper and Piper that night?" Sloan hesitated for only a moment, but it was enough. Her eyes flickered to her lawyer for guidance, but she quickly recovered. "Yes, I'm certain," she said. "Yes. And you're also certain that the address you gave the Uber driver was 20,400 North Clark Street?" Elena's question was pointed, and for the first time, Sloan's confident face cracked just a little. "Yes," Sloan replied, her voice slightly strained now. "I gave her that address." Elena nodded, and I felt a cold rush of adrenaline shoot through me. I knew this was the moment. "You're absolutely sure, Miss Montgomery? You didn't give the driver the wrong address? You didn't send your children into a dangerous part of the city, during a blizzard, alone, without proper clothing, because you thought your sister was home?" Sloan's face shifted, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, but Elena was already holding up a hand, cutting her off. "We have evidence, Your Honor," Elena said, turning to the judge. "We have a record of an email sent by Wren Baker to Sloan Montgomery at 3:30 p.m. on the 14th of January. The subject line, tonight. The contents of the email are clear. I will not be home, do not bring them. I will not open the door. Elena's voice didn't falter as she spoke the words, but I could see the effect it had on Sloan. The color drained from her face. The judge raised an eyebrow, looking at the papers in front of her. I believe I've seen this evidence. It has been entered into the record. Elena turned back to Sloan, who was now visibly uncomfortable, her hands trembling at her sides. Miss Montgomery, you read this email, didn't you? The one sent by your sister. Sloan shifted uncomfortably in her seat. I must have, she stammered, but it wasn't convincing. I could see her unraveling. Elena didn't give her a chance to recover. And yet, you proceeded to send the children to a location where they were at risk of freezing to death, knowing that your sister wasn't home, knowing she had refused to watch them. Sloan opened her mouth to speak, but the words didn't come. Instead, she looked at her lawyer, her face twisted with frustration and fear. Elena smiled slightly, though there was no warmth in it. No further questions, Your Honor. The judge didn't look at Sloan as she addressed the court. The witness is dismissed. We will reconvene tomorrow at 9 a.m. The gavel slammed down, and the courtroom buzzed with hushed conversations. I felt a rush of relief wash over me, but it was fleeting. This wasn't over. It wasn't over until it was all laid bare, until the truth was impossible to deny. I stood up, my legs shaky, my heart still pounding in my chest. I met Elena's eyes across the room, and she gave me the smallest of nods, acknowledgement. The fight wasn't won yet, but we had made a dent, and that, for now, was enough. We were one step closer to the truth, and I was done being the one to clean up the mess. The days that followed the courtroom were filled with a heavy, unshakable silence. Each day felt like a slow motion replay of the one before, as if time itself was trying to hold me in place, waiting for something to break. I didn't let it, though. I couldn't. I had made a decision, a choice that was final. No more lying, no more covering for Sloan. I found myself walking through the city streets, the cold air biting at my skin, but I barely felt it. The weight of the upcoming legal battle still pressed on my chest, but there was something else now, something unfamiliar but welcome. Hope. I didn't know how long I'd been walking, lost in my thoughts, when I saw him. Declan. I stopped in my tracks, a rush of emotions flooding over me, relief, warmth, a sense of calm that I didn't know I had been searching for until that moment. He looked different now. Different from the man I had seen just a few days ago. The strain was gone, replaced with something steadier. He was wearing that worn, navy coat of his, the one I had always liked, the one that looked like it had been through just as much as he had. And when he saw me, the softest smile spread across his face. It was the kind of smile that made the world feel right again. "Hey," he said, his voice warm, but there was a hint of concern in his eyes. "You good?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure if I was. "I'm okay." He took a step closer, reaching out to touch my arm. "You sure? You don't have to keep pretending. I'm here, you know that, right?" "I know," I said, swallowing back the sudden lump in my throat. I don't know what to do anymore." "You're doing everything you can," he said, his voice low, steady. "And we're gonna get through this. All of us." I looked up at him, meeting his eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something break inside me. The walls I had built. The walls I had put up to protect myself from everything around me, they started to crumble. It was scary, this feeling, this rawness, but I needed it. I needed to let myself feel, to stop holding on to the burden of perfection. I had spent so long trying to fix everything, trying to control it all. And now, I didn't have to. Declan was here. He was with me. And that was enough. I've been thinking about the future, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. About what happens after this. After it's all over. He raised an eyebrow. And what does that look like? I smiled slightly, though it felt strange. I don't know. But I think I need to start living for myself, for once. Not for anyone else. Declan nodded slowly, his eyes soft. That's a good place to start. The weight of the conversation felt like it belonged to another world. One that was outside the pain and the mess of everything that had happened. It felt too easy, too simple. But I knew that was the point. I had spent years making things complicated, holding on to everyone else's needs but my own. And now, it was my turn. Do you want to get some coffee? I asked. My voice a little steadier than before. I don't want to think about any of this, for just a little while. He chuckled, his hand brushing against mine in that familiar, comforting way. I'd like that. We walked together, side by side, in silence for a few moments. I knew that things weren't over, that the fight was far from finished. But for the first time, in what felt like forever, I didn't feel completely alone. Declan had shown up for me in ways I hadn't expected, in ways that mattered, and that made all the difference. We reached a small cafe at the corner. The kind with mismatched chairs, and the rich scent of fresh coffee that seemed to fill every corner of the room. It was warm inside, and the world outside felt like it belonged to someone else, someone who didn't have to carry the weight of their past in every step. We sat by the window, the city bustling outside, but it felt distant, like it was happening in a place I could observe, but not be a part of. I wanted that. I wanted peace. Declan leaned back in his chair, his eyes watching me carefully, waiting for me to speak. I could feel the questions he was holding back, but for once, I didn't feel like I had to answer them. I didn't have to explain myself to him. So, he said, breaking the silence. What's next for you, Ren? I smiled at the use of the nickname, the one I hadn't heard in years, the one that felt like home. I don't know, I said honestly, stirring my coffee absent-mindedly. But I think I'm going to start with figuring out how to live without all the pressure, without all the expectations. I want to be someone who doesn't have to fix everything. I just want to be me. He smiled, a quiet, genuine smile that made my chest feel light. Then let's start there. The weight in my chest had eased, just a little. But it was enough to feel different. I wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, or the day after that, but for now, this moment felt like the first step into a new chapter. I didn't know where it was going, but it was mine to decide. And that, I realized, was the freedom I had been searching for all along. The morning after the court hearing, everything felt different. The air was thicker, heavier, with the weight of what had happened settling in. I was still trying to process the rush of emotions from the previous day. But there was no time to rest. The fight was far from over. Declan was already up when I stepped into the kitchen, his back to me as he stood by the counter, scrolling through his phone. The coffee machine hissed, and the smell of fresh brew filled the space, grounding me in the present. "Morning," he said, his voice softer than usual, like he could feel the tension in the air too. He turned to face me, his eyes searching mine for some sign that I was okay, but I couldn't give him that. "Not yet." "Morning," I replied, reaching for a mug, my hands still unsteady. I had barely slept. My mind wouldn't stop racing. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sloan's face in the courtroom. The lies spilling from her lips like they were nothing. I could still hear the words she'd used, the way she manipulated everyone around her, like she was the victim. But in the silence of the morning, it was my voice that echoed in my head. I'd spoken the truth. And that felt powerful, but also terrifying. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I can't believe how far she went, Declan. How could she do this?" He set his phone down, his gaze softening as he stepped closer. "I know it's hard to process, but you did the right thing. You told the truth. You're not the one who put them in danger." I swallowed, the knot in my throat tightening. But I still couldn't protect them. I promised them safety, and I wasn't there. What kind of person does that? He reached out, his hand warm on mine. "You're not responsible for what she did, Ren. You can't keep taking the blame for everything. You're not her." I pulled my hand away gently, the guilt eating at me, unwilling to let go. "But I am. I've always been the one who fixes things, who steps in when no one else does. And now look at what happened. I failed them. I failed Cooper and Piper." Declan's voice was firm now, but there was understanding in it. "You didn't fail them. You're here now. You're fighting for them. That's what matters. You can't change the past, but you can protect them moving forward." I took a shaky breath, trying to convince myself of that truth. He was right. I was doing everything I could, but that didn't stop the fear from clawing at me. Fear of losing them. Fear of not being enough. I had spent my life keeping everyone else's pieces together. But this time, I couldn't fix it with a simple gesture or a well-timed word. This time, it was bigger than that. The doorbell rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. Declan glanced at me, his expression unreadable. But I could see the flicker of concern in his eyes. We both knew who it was. The world we had been fighting against was closing in. "I'll get it," he said quietly, heading for the door before I could respond. I stood there, my mind racing again. Replaying everything. Sloan's lies, my parents' attempts to bribe me, and the mountain of evidence still stacked against them. It felt like it was all too much to handle. How had it all come to this? I heard the murmur of voices from the hallway, then the door closing softly. Declan returned moments later, a concerned look on his face. "It's Elena," he said, his tone serious. "She wants to talk to you." I nodded, my stomach twisting. Elena had been a steady presence through all of this. But there was something in her voice, something in the way Declan had spoken, that made me uneasy. What more could there be? I followed him to the living room, where Elena was already sitting on the couch, her briefcase beside her, her expression unreadable. She looked up as I entered, her sharp gaze meeting mine. "Ren," she said, her voice steady but tight with something unspoken. We need to move quickly. There's been an update. I sat down opposite her, my pulse quickening. What's going on? What's happened? Elena opened the briefcase in front of her, pulling out a series of papers. She slid them across the coffee table toward me, her eyes never leaving mine. It's your parents, she said, her voice low. They've escalated things. They're trying to get this case dismissed. My chest tightened. What do you mean, dismissed? They're pulling some serious strings, Ren. Elena replied, her tone tight with frustration. Your father's been in contact with some people at the firm, at the higher levels. He's trying to use his influence to suppress the case. He's threatening to pull significant funding, to destroy the credibility of anyone involved in this, if it continues. He's been making some very dangerous promises, trying to buy people off. I stared at her, the world seeming to shift beneath me. How far is he willing to go? Elena's gaze hardened. As far as it takes. He's desperate, Ren. Your family will do anything to protect their name. And now, your father's trying to control the narrative. They've even started spreading false stories to the press. They're painting you as the villain, making it seem like you're the one who put everything at risk. You're the one being reckless. I felt my breath catch in my throat. I don't even know what to say. Why? Why are they doing this? Elena leaned forward, her eyes sharp with resolve. Because they don't want their reputation ruined. They don't want to lose everything they've built. And they'll destroy anyone in their path, to make sure they come out on top. I swallowed hard, the weight of everything pressing down on me. What can we do? We fight back, Elena said, her voice unwavering. We push harder. We get ahead of the story, control the narrative. We can't let them turn this around on us. Not when the truth is on your side. I nodded slowly, the determination slowly building within me. I won't let them get away with this. Not this time. Elena's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. That's the spirit. For the first time in days, I felt like I was on the right path. There was still a long road ahead, but I had a plan, and that made all the difference. The fight was far from over, but this time, I wouldn't be backing down.